This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's Motor Week. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss. We can talk about anything that you would like to talk about as long as it deals with cars or something with an engine in it. See, most engines work the same, whether they're big, small, or someplace in between, so we can talk about it. Number's 844-885-4677. Hey, I have an epiphany for you, and that is that, there's more to maintaining a car than changing oil. Now, I know a lot of you don't even believe in changing oil, but it's amazing how many of you believe in, I change the oil, that's all I ever have to do. Well, there was a man that came in driving, it was a stunning looking 4-year-old high-end luxury car. He was asking for an oil change and a brake check. Now, inside, outside, everywhere you looked, this $90,000 car looked like brand new. Now, after his paperwork was done, the car was brought into a bay and lifted. Now, you see, we perform a free safety check on every car to make sure our customers' cars aren't dangerous. Now, this gorgeous looking car only had about 100,000 miles on it, so it should have had a lot of life left, but underneath it looked more like a $500 hoopty. It was literally falling off its wheels. It was scary. How could a car look that good but be such a dangerous mechanical mess? The brakes were so worn they had destroyed the rotors, the shocks were leaking oil, the ball joints were about ready to come apart. The list went on for 3 pages. Now, having seen this car when it drove in, I could hardly believe what I was reading on the safety evaluation report and went out to verify. Sure enough, the car was indeed a mechanical catastrophe. We wrote an estimate of what was necessary to just make the car safe and a second estimate for everything the car really needed. It was staggering, reaching several $1,000s. So I sat down with the owner to go over what we had found. I complimented him on how great his car looked, then began going over its problems. But it didn't take long for the owner to interrupt me, stating that what I was saying didn't make sense. He had had the oil changed every 5,000 miles since the car was new. He always used the proper oil and bought everything the shop suggested. Now, I told him that oil changes are crucial, but oil changes only represent a small part of a total preventive maintenance package. He then produced a stack of repair orders from a quick lube lane. Oh no, I thought to myself, here we go. And as I thumbed through a small book of quick service repair receipts, including some fake things like flush brake master cylinder, clean the radiator, perform transmission fluid exchange, and about a dozen air filters, plus all kinds of other high-profit surface lane quick jobs. Well, the poor guy had spent a bloody fortune on preventive maintenance and received next to no benefits from all his dollars. So I explained why drivers should never rely solely on quick lanes. Now, although quick lanes are fast, they're seriously lacking in the depth of what they can check and even less in what they can repair. As their name implies, they do quick services, but brakes, ball joints, shocks, oil leaks, and most safety-related repairs fall far outside the definition of quick repairs. Plus, they require a high skill level. Bottom line, quick service lanes are great for a quick oil change, wiper blades, and other minor services, but they stink as a sole source for general preventive maintenance. For safety and longest vehicle life, you should use a full-service shop at least twice a year to make sure the more difficult and time-consuming safety parts get checked properly and regularly. That way, you won't wind up driving a dangerous car or one with hidden surprises that could cost thousands of dollars to fix. We see a lot of highly maintained cars that are in bad condition due to quick lube lane neglect. Remember, full service twice a year. It'll pay off in the end. So these are things that you have to be aware of. Nothing wrong with a quick lube, but you need to have the car at least twice a year come into a full service shop where they're going to raise it up. A lot of quick lubes, you're going to drive over a pit, the wheels are still on the ground, and you know, or they'll be on a drive-on rack that you drive on, they raise it up, then they do the service, the wheels are sitting on the rack, they lower the car, and then they drive the car off the other side of that rack because there's a ramp on both ends of the rack to lift the car. Well, you can't check ball joints, you can't check brakes properly, you can't do any of these things while the wheels are on the ground. So you need a full service shop where they're going to raise the car, take the wheels off, look at things, measure things, do a safety evaluation for you because, hey, parts wear out. And let me tell you, some of these things are incredibly dangerous. This particular car, we wouldn't drive it around the block. That's how bad some of the parts were in it. And the poor guy thought that he had been taking proper care of the car. But of course, the quick lube philosophy is to do things that you can do quickly and get them in, get them out. Well, that means they just ignore all of these other things. So all of these other wear parts on this car had been ignored for 4 years because he'd never been anyplace else. And, you know, 4 years of pure, total neglect on all of these front end parts and suspension parts and so on really did a number on it. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break. Now, when we come back, we're going to be joined by Mr. Rick Robinson from American High Performance in Lorton, Virginia, and we're going to see what he brings to the table other than holiday cheer. Coming up right here at Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month. But today, it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. This News and Views is from Auto Care Pro magazine and deals with automatic transmissions. Although their story relates to an Audi that refused to shift, it could apply to most cars. In this case, the tech did all the proper preliminary tests, including a visual inspection of related parts, which revealed a badly corroded transmission computer. Seems someone had replaced the cabin air filter and didn't properly install its cover. Now, this allowed water to leak onto the computer, and over time the water caused corrosion and no shift. A new module made the Audi shift like new. The tech also reinstalled the cabin air filter cover properly. There are two primary lessons here. First, just because the symptoms are horrific doesn't mean the cause is horrific. In fact, seemingly huge problems may be cheap to fix. Second, this is a case where you'll probably be taken if you didn't pick a good shop. That's because you've already convinced yourself you need a major repair, and when the shop confirms what you suspect, you just go for it. This shop could have easily sold a completely unnecessary transmission, but instead was honest and saved the owner thousands of dollars. So select your shop carefully. Rather than just cheap, look for ASE certification, skill, quality, and above all, honesty. Too often, the cheapest estimates come from shops with overall lower skill sets, or in some cases, something much worse, more greed and less honesty.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
All right, folks, for those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on tunein.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And right now we are joined by Mr. Rick Robinson from American High Performance in Lorton, Virginia. Rick, welcome back to the show. Happy holidays, I think.
Merry Christmas, Pat.
Well, you look merry, that's for sure.
It's wonderful to be here.
This is the ugly Christmas sweater contest?
This is my new one, yes. Last couple of years, that one got a little worn, and my wife went out and found me this one this year.
Ah, I like it. I like it, yeah. What's Rudolph driving there?
A Jeep.
A Jeep, okay.
That's in homage to all the SRT Jeeps that we've built in our shop, which you have enjoyed yourself, yours.
Yeah, SRT Jeeps, quite a piece of work.
They are. It's an amazing vehicle for as big a brick as it is. It will get up and go with particularly putting that much torque to the ground through four wheels.
Yeah, because it's all-wheel drive, not four-wheel drive. A lot of people think it's four-wheel drive. It is not. It is all-wheel drive, and it has gobs of traction.
Yep.
I often wonder on cars like that, when you start building them, do you ever find that you have a problem with driveline components because they get so much traction?
We do. And one of the things that we advise our customers, just had that conversation with a customer yesterday with a Camaro, who's up over 500 horsepower now, and that's not enough. He wants to top the Hellcats at 700 plus, and was asking whether his LS3 motor would hold up to that, and certainly in that range they will. You get much beyond that, and you're in a pretty risky area. But we can get you there without any difficulty. But you got to remember that all that torque's getting transferred down through the drivetrain to the rear wheels, and all of that was designed for a 450 horsepower car. If we double that, you're going to break things. So you're going to have to get an upgraded transmission. We're going to have to upgrade the axles in the rear, because the half shafts in the rear on a IRS car will not take the torque when those, particularly if you get wheel hop, which they have a tendency to do, and that tire suddenly grabs, it'll just snap an axle right in two.
Now, isn't this business, you build the engine and you work the drive line and so on, but then you're walking this kind of doing a dance between getting the tires to hook up, but not so much that things, even strong things, get wrung in two.
Right. You can break a lot of things because, again, engineering is the key. The car was engineered as a 450 horsepower car. We're going to double that, and things, of course, will break. But then there's that last component, You know, it's all about, it's not how much power it'll make on the dyno, it's how much power it can put to the ground. And that last final piece of the puzzle is the tire. And there's not a street tire made that will hold the kind of torque that we can make in today's V8 cars. It's just incredible the amount of power that we can make today. And tire technology is struggling to keep up. Bridgestone and Michelin have a couple of good products out there that are certainly much better than any other street tire out there, but still they have their limits.
People have no idea how much of every aspect of performance ultimately comes down to the grip of the tires.
Yep. It's a total engineering solution, and if you leave one piece out, it's not going to work.
Rick, let's take a phone call here. We have George from Boston. George, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Doing great.
So I have a question for you. It's a new car question. I currently have a 2010 Miata Grand Touring with the power hardtop. I've had 93,000 great miles on it. Well, end of year seems a good time to buy a car because dealers have to make their quotas. It's the kind of triple witching hour at the end of the year. And I found in the past I can get some pretty good deals. So I'm currently looking at a 2017 Mazda I like the power hardtop, but now they have the Targa version of it. So I've driven one, it's fine. But I said, you know, what are other Targas? If this is what I got, what are other cars that are similar? Well, I've discovered the Alpha 4C Spider, and nearby to me there's a 2016 that's new at a dealer, and it's like about 10 or 15K more than the RF if I work at it, I think. Right? So neither of these have any trunk space. Neither have a glove compartment. They're both Targas. The Miata is definitely the more fun car. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't even let me drive the 4C, which is, I get to sit in it, okay, so which is kind of off-putting. As a matter of fact, the Italian-sounding sales guy looked at me and said, well, if you'd come in with a Lotus, I might consider it. But he said, I don't believe this is a car for you. So am I insane if I go after the 4C? I used to work for Formula One, by the way, back in the 90s and 2000s. I've seen plenty, and I've driven plenty of odd cars. This guy had no idea. And I do have a sedan as a second car. Am I insane if I go after the 4C? What are the benefits and fails of that versus a Miata?
Number one, of course, you have to be willing to accept the past history of Alpha, which is pretty bad. Yet
okay.
Right now, we aren't seeing enough of them on the road to know that all of their electrical and electronics problems are resolved because you know, they just have a horrific history. The car itself, as far as driving, immense fun and a sound like you would not believe.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I mean it's intoxicating. If you're in a position where this can absolutely be a toy, I would say go for it. But if it has to be something that is also dependable and reliable and so on, I would think long and hard before buying it.
Well,
now,
that's where I'm at, because I
sure,
understand the Italian reliability, and I do have a sedan as a second car, so
okay.
That's my story.
But one thing is for sure, a Miata it will never be.
Very true.
You
And
know,
I've had this would be my third Miata, and they've been flawless mechanically and always fun to drive. And you know, it's just sort of I'm leaning toward the Miata, but I'm lured by the good-looking Italian. That's my story.
Oh, it's gorgeous to look at, and the leather and everything is so nice. And like I say, the sound, and it's fast, and it's just all kinds of things. And from magazines and so on, it gets very high ratings. We rate it really high on Motor Week, but the fact of the matter is none of the magazines, none of the TV shows, ours included, we don't have them long enough to know what the long-term reliability is going to be, because we may, if we have it for a year, we may put 20 to 30,000 miles on it. Well, out here in the repair world, that's still a brand new car.
Absolutely.
So, we're looking at things where you get 70, 80, 90, 100, 120,000 miles on it. How does it fare then? And in all honesty, the majority of the Alphas that we've seen have been pretty much used as toys and have almost no miles on them.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I drive my Miata pretty much every day. And as a matter of fact, I put snow tires on it in the winter, and it's a fun car in the winter. I don't go out in a blizzard. I'm in Boston, but that does happen here. And I know you get that down in Maryland too, but I have fun in that car in the winter. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and of course they wouldn't even tell. They even said to me, "There are no snow tires for this Alpha." The guy kind of looked down his nose at me, and I've researched online. Apparently, that's not true. You can put it together. You can get the rims from Mopar and find tires that fit those rims from online tire places and make it a go. But I probably also wouldn't want to break a car like that. I think with the carbon fiber body, one little ding, it's not like replacing a piece of plastic on a Miata.
It's not at all like the Miata. The Miata, there are parts everywhere for it, and whether you want factory or aftermarket or whatever, and the Alpha is pretty much going to be one source, period, dot.
All right, Pat. I think you've probably put me in the direction I thought I was going anyway. I will have seen the Alpha 4C, but I think I'll see if I can get a good deal on a RF Targa. It's a nice looking car.
Okay,
I get to
George.
drive it. It's just as much fun. Take care. You have a great show, Pat. Enjoy it every week, and a very friendly producer too.
Oh, I'm glad you think he's friendly. You should see what he does to me.
I'm the only one. Yeah, I could believe it. Have a great day.
Take care. Oh, my goodness. Yes, it's interesting, and I know you don't work on those things, but, some of this exotic stuff that we see. And, yeah, it's gorgeous, and it sounds wonderful, and they drive so nice and all the rest, but when they get some age on them, they're just never-ending money pits.
Yep. I've never had any experience with Italian cars, but I have with British cars, and I had a little 59 MGA back in my college days.
Oh, designed by Lucas, the Prince of Darkness.
That's right. And I sat in the dark on the side of the road many times. But, Jaguar, which was one of their signature cars for decades, were just terrible until Ford bought them and started building some reliability into the cars, some quality and reliability.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing you've got to give both the Japanese and now the Koreans, but I know a lot of people think that domestic cars are a piece of crap. I would wholeheartedly disagree, because we, back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, you never had a domestic car that came in that wasn't leaking oil or coolant or something. Now it's reversed. We hardly ever see these problems on domestics, yet we get the Japanese cars that come in with the leaky valve cover gaskets and all this other stuff that used to be solely domestic.
Yeah. The Japanese got their foothold in the mid-'70s when Detroit was just building absolute junk. And they couldn't even brag about horsepower anymore, because the emission systems had just strangled that in American cars. The Japanese were building some inexpensive, reasonably reliable cars at the time, and came in and now they own half the market.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Now, you have some interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, we talked about drag racing quite a bit. We haven't talked about NASCAR, because I'm not a big NASCAR guy. Please don't, throw things at me out there for that. But the thing that has caught my eye recently is speed racing. Now, what is speed racing? Everybody's out to try to reach a certain the highest speed they can, right? But speed racing really just focuses on how fast can my car go, not how quick can I get through a quarter mile. It's ultimately how fast it is, and that's what everybody's bragging rights is, right? Quarter mile numbers don't mean a lot to most people, but 130, 140, 150 miles an hour, that means something to the average car owner out there. And up until recently, there hasn't really been a way for the street car owner to determine how fast my car really is without risking giving the car to the to the highway patrol at the same time. And this really got started a few years back down in Texas when some guys discovered the old Beeville Naval Air Station. That was a Navy jet base and had been closed and turned over to the city in one of the defense cutback eras, and it had an 8,000-foot runway. And of course, to go max speed like that, you need room. And an 8,000-foot runway with the overrun on each end gave them a good 10,000 feet of pavement to run a full mile course. So they invented the Texas Mile. And most people in the car culture now have heard of that by now. And it took a while for them to get up to the kind of speeds that we're doing today. But the attraction of it is whatever it is, and go out there and just go for it on a runway and just see how fast this thing will go. At that particular place, you got a mile to do. And this guy turns on a speed of 292 miles an hour.
Good God.
And that's from a dead stop, full mile run. The good thing about that for a streetcar owner is it's not as punishing as drag racing. Drag racing, because we're worried about ET, how fast can I get to the end of that quarter mile? You're just slamming through the gears. You're putting the maximum stress on that car that you can put on it.
Shock loads are horrible.
Terrible, particularly off the line, where that's where the race is won or lost, is off the line, and that's where things get broken most of the time. In speed racing, you can be a little more gentle with it on the acceleration side, because it's not how quickly I get there; it's how fast I'm going when I get to the end, and I go through that measured segment of pavement where they determine what your speed is. This kind of racing, though, goes back to the origin of cars. That's where Daytona Beach got its reputation in the automotive racing industry. This really started there. There was the Brits and others were doing some things in various places, but they discovered that 3-mile stretch of absolutely straight, flat, hard-packed sand beach in Daytona, and said that's the place to go. And they started sponsoring that there. And they broke 100 miles an hour at Daytona Beach. They broke 200 miles an hour at Daytona Beach. There was 15 different land speed records set on Daytona Beach before Malcolm Campbell put in his final top speed there of 272 miles an hour. And then they moved to Montevideo, where he quickly broke 300 miles an hour that same year.
And then Daytona evolved into NASCAR. Although they were doing circle track racing on the sand at Daytona Beach, even way back then, in the Barney Oldfield days, they were out there doing that. But a lot of people, I don't think, realize the amazing strides that they made in speed early in the automotive evolution. Malcolm Campbell set that 272 mile an hour record at Daytona Beach in 1935. Wow.
That's amazing. And then he went to Bonneville and broke 300 in 1935.
And if you want to see how amazing that is, go to an antique car show and look at what cars were back then.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be too inclined to drive one much over 45 or 50. You look at the tires they had in those days. And
yeah, they were certainly pushing the realms of engineering, and of course back then, it is now, there's no replacement for displacement, and they were using V16 aircraft engines, just strapped into a car and hanging on for for life, and reaching some pretty incredible speeds. Now around the United States, there's not too many Navy jet stations available to do this on, so. There's a number of groups that have started organizing half-mile races because the typical small commercial local airport would have enough room, enough length of runway to get a half-mile run and still have room to stop. That stopping thing is important.
Yeah, it does play into the equation.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And we've gotten involved with one called the Virginia Half Mile. It's a group called Wanna Go Fast that runs a number of these up and down the East Coast and into the Midwest as well. And they pick an airport, they work out a deal, and for 2 days you get a whole weekend out there on a runway just going for it, and just to see how fast you can go. And we have a video of our little Fox body race car that we took there. Now this is just a simple 88 Fox Mustang with a 351 Windsor in it.
This is the $5,000 car.
That's right. This is our budget race car, and this was at an airport in Southwest Virginia that sits on top of 4,000-foot mountain too. Getting there was as much of a challenge as it was running the race, but we turned in a top speed of 144 miles an hour.
Wow.
In that race car, which I was pretty happy with. I wanted to break 150, but we didn't quite get there. But we learned some things in the process, and one of our bread and butter jobs at the shop is changing gears, because you want to go to a lower gear than what came from the factory in order to get that better bite, be able to put more torque to the wheel. Differential gears are torque multipliers. That's why we have those in the back, not only to send the torque out to the wheels, but to increase the torque that I'm getting to the ground over what the engine's producing. And that's why we go from typically a gear ratio in the low 3s to maybe a 410 for drag racing, because it gives you that extra oomph out of the hole to get the car going. But at the top end, it starts to work against you, and that's one thing we discovered. When we made that 144-mile-an-hour run, I was in 4th gear, and just flat out. That 351 was turning at about 6,300 RPM, which is
that's about all.
Which is stretching it for
Right.
a 351. And we decided, okay, I can't go to 5th gear because I start slowing down at 5th gear. I'm not putting enough torque to the wheel in 5th gear. So let's drop the gear ratio a little bit. Let's go from the 373s down. We got our hands on a set of 315s and put those in there, and went back and ran, and I lost speed. Because again, and even in 4th gear, I wasn't putting enough torque to the wheel to overcome Mother Nature, aerodynamics. And that's what really comes into play in speed racing, is the aerodynamics and the slipperiness of the car. The video that the folks saw there was us running against a blown C6 Corvette. Now, complete mismatch. And that's one of the things about this racing, is you're really not racing against the other guy. You're seeing what you can do with your car, and you just line up with whoever shows up next to you. Doesn't matter. And of course, he was way out of our class and blew on by us. But cars like that, can produce a higher speed with the same amount of power because they have a lower coefficient of drag. When you get up to those speeds, aerodynamic drag plays a big factor.
Yeah, and your Fox body Mustang is kind of a brick.
It is. And there's some things that we can do to improve it, and we will. But when you look at the next video that we'll show, if we've got the time in this segment, there was a gentleman up there running at the same time that we were in a twin-turbo Viper. And this car was probably putting out somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 horsepower.
Whoa.
And he turned in time or speed in a half-mile course in 229 miles.
Oh my God.
229 and a half a mile.
That is all.
Now that Ford GT got to 293 in a full mile. And that starts to give you an idea of how much more horsepower you need to go every 10 miles above that. It increases by the cube of the speed. And the faster you go, exponentially more power to go any faster.
And another thing that I've noticed on when we do stuff for high speed, the faster you go, the slower you go faster.
That's right. Your rate of acceleration diminishes rapidly because you're pushing against the wind.
Right, the wind and frictional losses on all sorts of different things and so on.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
In my Navy career, I had the privilege of flying some of the fastest things in the world, and in a Phantom, I reached Mach 2.1. Well, at Mach 2.1, the sound of the air going by the airplane is incredible, high-pitched scream as the airplane goes through the air, even at high altitude. But you can feel the heat on the canopy and the skin of the aircraft from the friction going that fast.
Yeah, amazing. Let's take a break. More with Rick Robinson from American High Performance coming up here on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Think you'll pocket a lot more money if you sell rather than trade your car? Perhaps, but appearance sells cars, and your poor car is a bit grungy. There's dull paint, that ugly coffee stain on the seat, and a sweaty arm stain on the door, plus crumbs in every crack and crevice. Yep, when you look close, it's kind of ugly, and sadly for you, most used cars are bought on looks more than condition. That means a good cleanup job or pay a couple $100 to have it done. Next, because many used car buyers pull dipsticks and check fluids, you should clean the engine bay and change all the fluids. Buyers usually don't know what's good or bad, but someone on the internet says smart shoppers pull dipsticks, so buyers pull dipsticks, which often leads to questions about service and possible problems. Also, if the tires show any wear, buyers may assume there are worn front end parts. Don't forget the high cost of ads so people know it's for sale. And the questions. Is there a warranty? Will you take a trade? Is it inspected? Will you take a check? Can I give you $100 down and $100 a week? And so on. Now, a biggie. You might actually be risking your life, too. Where do you safely show a car so you don't have strangers eyeballing you and your home or trying to steal the car? When you look at the aggravation, work, expense, and dangers of selling a car, trading often looks really good. I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't. Yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Hi, folks. Please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. And for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right, what else you got for us, Rick? You know, you're talking about speed racing, and that has been something that's been going on for close to a century now. And every time somebody says, well, we can't go 300 miles an hour, somebody does, and 400 and so on. What is the land speed record right now? Do you know?
Well, of course, Bonneville is the mecca now of land speed runs, you know, given the fact that they've got miles of this flat salt to run on. And we talked about one recently, the Buckeye Bullet that set the electric land speed record. Kind of
this past week in the Utah
portends
desert,
the future,
a rocket-looking vehicle called the Venturi
electric
Buckeye
vehicles.
Bullet 3.
And their recent record was 341 miles an hour in an electric vehicle, a 3,000 horsepower electric
Salt
vehicle.
Flats, that's 11 miles.
In one of these long, streamlined speed racer cars. But the ultimate land speed record was set by Lieutenant Andy Green, a British fighter pilot, in the Thrust SSC, who finally broke the sound barrier and land speed at 763 miles an hour.
I would say that was fast.
The amazing thing is that was set in 1997, and we haven't broken it since. But that team that built that car is building a new car now, and their goal is to break 1,000 miles an hour. And in the video we run of the Thrust SSC, you hear the shockwave pass as he goes by, and the boom of the what they call breaking the sound barrier. It's actually the shockwave coming off the vehicle.
That's amazing.
It is, and it's one of those things here where just you know, a twitch in the wrong direction can spell a disaster. But the amazing thing is, if you watch the video, as he goes through the sound barrier, and you experience this in airplanes too, the shock waves start to shift on the body of the vehicle, and it affects the aerodynamics of the vehicle. And the car starts drifting to the left. You see him going well off to the left of the center line. And he's got that steering wheel a full 90 degrees over to try to bring it back.
I would say that was fast.
I'm not sure how much that actually turns the wheels. Probably not a lot, but it seems pretty dramatic when I go a full 90 degrees on the steering wheel at 600 miles an hour.
Yeah, for sure. You would think that that would put you topsy-turvy in a heartbeat.
Yep.
But
and that's one of the challenges you face, is that instability going through the speed of sound, which we faced in airplanes, you know, back in the 40s and 50s when we were experimenting with them out over the desert in California.
you know, I don't think the average person, they think all you do is bolt on more and more horsepower and go faster and faster, but that couldn't be farther from the truth in today's world.
Right. Stability becomes a big factor. Handling is always something you have to address, because you can quickly exceed the ability of the car to maintain a straight path.
Yeah, and at really high speeds, all these dynamics of air movement and stuff like that start getting pretty radical.
Mm-hmm. When we did our 144 miles an hour in our little Fox Mustang, I had the drag racing skinnies on the front end, and it was starting to dance a little bit as we got up there. You know, it was something that you had to really pay a lot of attention to keep it going straight.
Mm-hmm. All right, what else you got?
Well, I think a question came in about what kind of performance activities are available in winter, you know. And other than playing bumper cars with everybody else out on the freeway, particularly the SUVs who love to show how fast they can go and forget how slow they can stop.
Yeah, that amazes me. These people, the newbies that go out and buy an SUV or pickup or whatever it might be with four-wheel drive, realize that they can go like stink, but completely forget that every vehicle on the road has four-wheel brakes. And they can't stop any better than anybody else.
Yeah, going through the clover relief exits and entrances onto the freeway, particularly the exits, you can see the SUV stripes along the guardrail.
Right.
On almost every exit.
And some of them you see some tracks going down into some probably strange real estate that they didn't want to visit.
Mm-hmm. But there actually is racing that goes on during the winter. I spent some time in Detroit in my youth when I was working as a student engineer for Ford, and they put studs in their tires and go out on the frozen lake, Lake St. Clair, and race in the wintertime.
Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
I watched that when I was a kid. I grew up in southwestern New York, and same thing. Of course, up there we have winter, July, and winter. And so there's lots of things that go on in the winter because it's a major portion of the year. Mm-hmm. And same thing, studded tires and go out on a lake and have fun. Yeah.
And the off-road guys are getting into it, going out in the wintertime in the snow with their four-wheel drive vehicles and go romping and stomping through the snow.
The only problem with that is, especially if you're in an area like we are here outside of Washington, D.C., is that going on anything that is frozen is probably not a great idea because you have no idea how thick the ice is, and typically, unless it's a really unusual winter, it isn't cold long enough to really make it safe.
Right. I can't think of anywhere right around the D.C. area where we'd be able to engage in something like that, other than perhaps, like I said, the off-road racing out in the woods in the snow. But you're right. Lake St. Clair freezes, a foot or so thick in the wintertime, and will support a vehicle. But in most cases, you don't even want to walk out there yourself, much less drive a vehicle on.
All right. Well, let's take our last break, and when we come back, we have a question here. I don't know who this is from. Oh, it's Bill, about a new Corvette Grand Sport. We'll talk about that in just a minute. That's coming up on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Do you use the proper strategy when buying replacement parts for your car or truck? Hi, I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage, and I've noticed that many of you who buy auto parts make a huge mistake. You shop for one and only one thing: price. Now, naturally, price is important, but quality is more important. When you buy the cheapest part in town, you may sacrifice quality, and less quality often means shorter life and less reliability. In some cases, the cheapest part may even compromise vehicle safety. For the best value from the parts you buy, look for the lowest price, but only on high-quality parts. When you compare prices, be sure you're comparing parts that have the same specifications. And never buy a part with a lower rating than your car requires. What many drivers don't realize is cheap can be very costly in the end. Quality usually costs less per mile over the long haul. I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
All right, folks, we're talking to Mr. Rick Robinson from American High Performance in Lorton, Virginia. We were talking before we went to break about things you can do to have fun in the winter. And Chris wanted to know what happened to studded tires. Well, they were outlawed in most places simply because they tear up the streets, especially blacktop.
That's right. I mean, studs are great for ice, as you mentioned earlier. That's what they're designed for, is to penetrate into the ice and give you some grip, because the best snow tire in the world is not going to do anything on ice. You know, you're on ice skates at that point. So we use the metal studs to get into the ice when you're in those conditions. But if, like today, where we were supposed to get 5 or 6 inches of snow and we got virtually nothing, if you're running around out there in studded tires, you're just chewing up the asphalt.
Yeah.
And wearing out the studs at the same time.
Right. So the reason they are gone is because they are mostly illegal. I guess there's a couple of states out there where you can still use them for certain months out of the year and so on. But anyway, before we run out of time, Rick, this is right up your alley. This is from Bill. He says, is there a way to deactivate the cylinder deactivation system? He says, I've purchased a new Grand Sport Corvette with an automatic. The dealer advised that because it is an automatic, the owner cannot keep the system off. I purchased the vehicle because it is an 8-cylinder and do not want the engine going into 4-cylinder mode at all. Is there any way I can bypass the system to keep it running in 8 cylinders all the time? Yes. Explain.
Yes. We have to use custom software to go into the computer and basically reprogram the computer to turn them off. And we've done that with both the Mopars and the Chevys as well. There have been some issues, mostly in the Mopars, with the lifters themselves once they're turned off and not operating anymore. It is a modification to the lifter, so if you just want to turn them off and drive around, I don't think you're going to have an issue, and we haven't seen any with our cars. If you're building a high horsepower car, if you want to turn the horsepower up at the same time, my recommendation would be let's do a cam upgrade and replace everything and just get that system out of there.
Well, what we see the biggest problems here, we get a lot of these GM fuel management engines that get used on the highway where they're in 4-cylinder mode. Well, what seems to happen is that, of course, they have to keep the lifter lubricated, so there's a little bit of oil flowing through there, but it can't be enough to pump the lifter up and so on, so it's sitting there on that big spring just dancing around in there, and doesn't seem like they get enough oil. So we see quite a few of them with bad cams and lifters, and especially when they get 80 or 90,000 miles on them. And we see a few of the Mopars where the lifter just comes apart in there. And in both cases, it seems to be on cars that are used on the highway where they're in the deactivated mode a lot.
Right. As you said, the stress on them really comes in the deactivated mode where that lifter has collapsed and it's not operating the way it normally does, not getting the oil flow that it normally does. It's sitting there bouncing up and down loose against the valve spring, and seems to be an issue.
Yeah, and I understand that you know, the government wants better fuel economy and all this other stuff, and you put enough of these together and it does make a difference, but good golly, folks, there's got to be something better. We're paying a horrible price for an extra 1/10 of a mile per gallon per car.
We are. And the diesel technology is the worst, where I'm injecting more fuel into the exhaust to reburn the exhaust just to get a cleaner emission out the tailpipe.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm putting, 50% more fuel at the tailpipe at the same time.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't really think that the final say should be in the hands of politicians. Should be dealt with more by engineers and people who have automotive knowledge and know the ins and outs of all of this, instead of politicos sitting there with fancy ideas.
Yeah, they throw ultimatums out, and I understand, the government tries to push technology, but you can only push technology so far. When you set an unreasonable limit that the engineers have to struggle to meet, they'll come up with a way around it, but it's not the most efficient way to get there. And we tend to drive inefficient, costly solutions into the marketplace instead of really working towards what the best solution is.
Yeah, I hate to see these fuel management cars or trucks and so on come in that they need $3,000 or $4,000 worth of repairs, and throughout the life of the vehicle, the driver may have saved $500 on gas. Where's the trade-off here?
Yeah, and what did he pay you to replace those lifters, right?
Right, exactly. So, all right. Hey, Rick, your address.
We are right off of I-95 in beautiful Lorton, Virginia, at 8480 Terminal Road. You can find us on the internet at AmericanHighPerformance.com. We have a great website and a great web store there as well for all your performance parts. And call us at 703-339-7412.
One more time on the phone number.
703-339-7412.
Okay. Well, Rick, we are about out of time. I certainly want to thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you'll come back and join us next month, and we'll have something else interesting to talk about.
I'd love to.
Okay. All right. Hey, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Steve McMillan and George Stockton for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage and Rick Robinson from American High Performance, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, drive gently. See ya.